Hi, everyone. I'm Olivia,
And I'm Amy,
and this
and this
is
is Girls
Girls
Gone
Gone
Spooky,
Spooky.
episode 2. Welcome.
Yes. Welcome, veteran podcasters already. It's great.
Yes, for many
Um,
listeners.
yes. So, after last week's episode, we realized we have so many topics to cover already, but we decided to focus on locations that are specific to our lives so far. One being Cal Poly, where we, if you listened to last episode, experienced a lot of spooky weirdness, and then Denver Health, where I think Amy has also experienced some spooky weirdness.
Yes, those will be today's stories.
Yes, amazing. So, where should we start? Who goes first?
I think we should start with you since it's like a
Okay.
continuation from
Yeah.
last
Okay.
time.
That makes sense. So, I tried to get a little bit of history and try and understand some of the Native American, indigenous peoples' connection to the land involved with Cal Poly. And then that kind of led me down some other routes too. So let's take it back to 1770. I promise this is going to
Wow.
be quick.
A history
Basically,
lesson.
a history lesson, everyone. Buckle up. Surprise, not a paranormal podcast. Welcome to history class. So 1770, Spain began settling on the Chumash people's territory, which is where San Luis Obispo is. It's included in that area, but it's kind of a larger area within the Central Coast. There were many other indigenous peoples and tribes in sort of the surrounding areas as well, but all of Cal Poly was Chumash territory. So in 1790, so only 20 years later, the Spaniards began forcibly enslaving the Chumash people and forcibly removing them from the land. So I think, most of us know that this is a part of the history, colonizers and the colonized. From that time so late 1700s to 1823, they were transferred to missions. So there was a main mission in San Luis Obispo, but then there are missions all along El Camino as well. So some were moved into Santa Barbara area, which is out of their original territory. They were kind of just dispersed all over the place. Many were still in San Luis Obispo, though, in the mission there. Mm-hmm. So that's already sad. And then it takes an even worse turn. In 1833, there were major outbreaks of cholera and malaria, which wiped out many, many, many of the Chumash people. Not only just because they were sick with a disease they'd never been exposed to before, but also just because they were not really provided any kind of medical care. About 15 years later, California as a land went back to the US via the Treaty of Guadalupe. And basically that brought about not as many Spaniards, but just other white settlers from the rest of the U.S. and gold prospectors, bringing basically nothing but more disease into Chumash land, into the Chumash people. So it was kind of interesting, I will say. Cal Poly, I think there's a lot in I'm very happy about this, of a lot of awareness being shown on indigenous peoples, and obviously the fact that we stole their land when Europeans came here. But I think, it's challenging to see kind of, if we're actually paying homage, is that really enough? I don't think, I think the answer is no. But it was interesting to see Cal Poly includes on their website quite a bit of information around, they do Indigenous land acknowledgement on the site. And then they give you a bunch of details too about not only the geography and some of the history, but about what kind of language they spoke, what they ate, what they, they were known for these coiled baskets with these designs on them. So it's just kind of interesting. And they, try and do other work to not only raise awareness, but kind of pay it forward, or I guess pay it back to some of those indigenous people. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah,
so in terms of, I thought from a paranormal perspective, I think the question we always had was these apartments we lived in were finished in 2009. I found on the Cal Poly website. So it's highly unlikely someone had died in that apartment and we
Right.
didn't know about it. So, the fact that so many of the Chumash people were wiped out from cholera and malaria, I think that kind of made sense if there were potentially like burials there. The other thing I wondered about too, and, I want to avoid at all costs painting the indigenous peoples of that area to be, vindictive, but I also kind of wonder like the Native Americans had such a deep connection to the land, and the fact that it was basically they were ripped from it or forced to work it. It's like a part of me kind of wonders like was sort of a part of their spirituality maybe like broken in all of that trauma, and that like that energy remained in the land, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's a good theory.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So then I was like, okay, let's see if I can find other hauntings from Cal Poly. So interestingly, there isn't a ton about Cal Poly specifically. Now, I found a couple Reddit threads that were kind of interesting. So people asked for like ghost stories on campus or in San Luis Obispo generally. Now, San Luis Obispo generally pretty haunted. So like there were quite a few. Yeah, there were quite a few stories just of like, I don't think even places that I'd ever been, but like had heard of, like San Luis Inn and places like that, I wouldn't think twice about. But there was one story, one of the buildings, do you remember Estrella? I don't remember where that would have been, where that dorm would have been. But people were saying like, maybe, but like room 3 on the ground floor is haunted. I've heard people walking or running around, wardrobe doors opening and closing, like things like being shuffled around on my desk when like no one was around. Her roommate had bruises and like handprints on her legs and stomach.
No.
They found, this one really freaked me out. They found smudge marks from something with 6 fingers on the bottom of their fan, which like, not that, people have 6 fingers sometimes, but like, it just seems it's probably not that common. So it just seems kind of odd. And I guess it could have been like someone swiped it and then did it again. I guess. Right. But anyway, just kind of creepy. And then there was one other haunting in Muir. So for context, Amy and I, freshman year, when we met in the dorms, we were in a certain set of dorms that were known as the Red Bricks, and they were all named after trees. So, well, most of them were. So Muir was one of them. And was it trees or is it named after woods? Is it mountains?
Is Trinity like a...
Because what were the other ones? I don't even remember the other ones. Oh, wait, Santa Lucia.
Yeah, Santa Lucia and...
Okay, I'm wrong. I'm so wrong.
I don't know.
It was not trees. I was so wrong.
I don't know.
Maybe.
It's something natural.
So funny. Okay. I know nothing. So sorry. So whatever. It was a group of dorms that were kind of connected.
Sorry, I just thought there was Sequoia.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, maybe that's what I was thinking. But yeah, so Muir was one of the dorms kind of in that little collection. And there were a couple of alleged hauntings in that building as well. And this led me down the Kristen Smart alley. So for anyone who doesn't know, if anyone listening is into true crime, I'm sure you already know, but Kristen Smart was a young woman who disappeared during her time at Cal Poly. So let's see, just quick synopsis, and this is from Wikipedia. On May 25, 1996, Cal Poly student Kristen Smart disappeared without a trace after a birthday party. The university and sheriff's department have been investigating leads, including excavating the land around the Cal Poly P, which is just a landmark on campus on an adjoining hill. In 2017, the excavation of the area surrounding has been completed with articles found. However, the Sheriff's Department has not yet released what the findings are. On April 13, 2021, so just spring of this year, Paul Flores, who was always a suspect, Paul Flores and his father, Ruben Flores, were arrested and taken into custody in suspicion of Smart's disappearance. Their homes were searched, and investigators found some numerous, quote, items of interest, end quote. So that's the latest. What's interesting is, so I think I guess we were nearing it was some anniversary of it that they did, like not a retrospective, but like a highlight on her and her life and her disappearance. And one of the things that they noted is, if anyone's familiar with Scott Peterson, he was also at Cal Poly at the same time. And so there was some initial speculation in hindsight, obviously not in 1996, but because Scott Peterson had not yet murdered his wife and unborn child, which we'll get back to that in a second. But there were some thoughts that, given their time overlapped, and I think he also lived near the building where she was last seen, that it's possible he was involved. So that's kind of interesting. So coming back to the haunting, people who've experienced this weirdness in Muir have said that it seems to indicate that it's Kristen. Now, I was unable to find details around why that might be. Like, why do they think it's Kristen Smart versus, anyone else or some other entity, but wasn't really able to find anything on that. And then I kind of stumbled across, apparently they're kind of, it's possible that they're reconsidering the Scott Peterson involvement, which doesn't make a ton of sense to me, just because the investigation was really, I mean, if you've like watched any documentaries about it or listened to any podcasts about it, the investigation was like really botched. They missed out on a lot of opportunities to really gather evidence that was going to get the person who actually did this, which I think most people just kind of like informally assume was Paul Flores. Mm-hmm. There were what are those dogs called? Cadaver dogs that went and found, like, there was definitely evidence of some kind of bodily remains in, I think, Paul's mother's backyard or something like that. And so everyone, I think, assumed, okay, he did it.
And in his dorm room at the time.
That's right. Yeah. So it's like all arrows point to Paul Flores.
Yeah.
But, and then, they find this, like, evidence or whatever in this last round when they took Paul and his dad into custody. So it's like, it's all very like vague and elusive. I feel it's always been like that. And, my heart goes out to her family, because I think, one, it's become such a spectacle. Like, she's, it's true crime. And I think anybody interested in it is like, oh, this is like exciting. It's like, well, it's not exciting for her family who lost their child before her life even like really kicked off. So obviously devastating, but just very interesting that there are some connections to potentially hauntings in that area. And even like on the crime side, like that Scott Peterson may have been involved. So just really quickly on Scott Peterson, he basically plotted to and followed through on murdering his pregnant wife, Lacey Peterson, and I believe was sentenced to life in prison. I just read, when I was looking through some of this stuff online too, that I think he's been in the process of being resentenced. So I don't know. I think he had like 2 lifetimes worth, because it was murder 1 and he killed technically 2 people, his wife and his unborn child, but is in the process of, I guess, being resentenced. So all just like very odd, because even if, I mean, it doesn't seem like Scott Peterson was actually involved, but it's just, what are the odds that they were both there at the same time? And it's confirmed that they were actually enrolled at the same time. And they must have both been freshmen, I guess, if he was living in one of the red brick dorms. So very
Yeah.
eerie.
That is weird.
So yeah, it's nothing like, I feel like a little bit of an exercise in futility, just because there's nothing really like concrete that's like, oh, it's probably this ghost who haunted us in Holly Canyon Village.
Right.
But I think as we get into some of the other just like spiritualities and other I guess cultures that believe in just different things. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me is like skinwalkers. Like, I feel like the Native American, a lot of indigenous peoples have like a completely different set of like the boogeyman, basically. Like, they have completely different kind of like monsters that are lurking, and the concepts behind them actually feel a lot more realistic than like vampires and zombies and things like that. They're much more like spirit based or like demonic, it seems. So I'm sure we'll get into that more, but you know, it's serving Pet Cemetery vibes, I feel. So that is basically what I have found. But
so interesting.
Nothing super concrete, but I'm very curious to hear about Denver Health, because I feel like that place is sketchy as hell.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel the same way. But yeah, that's so interesting about Scott Peterson.
Yeah.
That timing is such a weird coincidence.
So weird.
But I mean, obviously this is not a murder podcast, but
right.
that case is so like just fascinating. If you want to listen more, Your Own Backyard is the best podcast to listen to.
So good.
Yeah. Well, shall we jump into Denver Health?
Let's do it.
Let's see. So, history lesson number 2.
Yay.
So Denver Health was founded in 1860 in Denver, of course. And at the time, Denver Health Denver itself was the Wild West, basically. They talked about gamblers and shootouts in the street. And in fact, the first surgery that was performed in Denver was at what became Denver Health after there was a shootout and someone got shot in the arm and they amputated it.
Hey.
And that was the first surgery that happened in Denver. So that was in what's now downtown Denver. But then as Denver grew with the gold rush, etc., it moved to where it currently is in 1873. And I realized through this that I didn't know Denver and Colorado in general was kind of put on the map by tuberculosis, which sounds strange. But
a weird claim to fame.
I know, but it was like, I think 1 in 3 people in Colorado in the 1920s had tuberculosis. And people were flocking there because high altitudes are better for people that have tuberculosis because there's lower oxygen levels in the air.
Yeah.
And somehow that prevents the disease from spreading as rapidly in the lungs.
Interesting.
So that was a big driving factor for Denver Health to become a bigger city hospital like it is now. And I had heard that this building where I've had my creepy experiences was the tuberculosis ward, but I did not find anything that explicitly stated that. So a lot of what I had heard might have just been word of mouth, but there was an article that I saw from the History Channel that said that the first tuberculosis sanitarium was built in Denver in 1860, which is the same year that Denver Health was built. So that seems like a coincidence.
And they probably wouldn't want to advertise that.
Right.
I would guess. Like, hey, we had hella people die here.
I know, especially because now this building is offices and laboratories. So
good.
People sitting there all day.
Just getting haunted.
Yeah. Yeah, basically. I think probably not until nighttime, which is, of course, when I was in there.
Of course. Great. Perfect. I love that for you.
I know. I'm glad that's not part of my job anymore, but
Me too.
yeah. The other thing I found about this particular building was that it was where the first ambulances would arrive, and these were horse-drawn carriages in the 1890s. So the
Oh,
ambulance would
wow.
pull in to the lower level of this building, and they would have a system of bells to alert the
Mm.
medical staff that were on the top two floors about what type of patient they were delivering. I just thought that was interesting.
Oh,
It says they would ring it
yeah.
once for people who were sick, twice for emergency victims, quote unquote, and
Mm.
3 times for suicides and poisonings. Um,
Uh,
so it's
okay.
safe to
That's a
say
weird,
that
like, mashup category, but
I
sure.
know, yeah, suicides and poisonings. I mean, I don't know
Like,
why that
still
goes hand
living,
in
though?
hand.
Or was it,
Who
like,
knows?
delivering dead bodies?
Well, that's the
Yikes.
thing that this is another thing that I could not find anything to corroborate the story. But I
Mm-hmm.
had heard, so this building is very distinctive. You can, if you live in Denver or know Denver, you'll recognize
Mm-hmm.
this building because it has a huge smokestack coming out of the top.
Mm-hmm.
And I had heard that that is because that's where they cremated bodies. But the official story is that that was how they generated power for the hospital at the time. So why couldn't it be
Sure it
both?
was. Yeah. Yeah,
So
generating power with the dead
dead
bodies that
bodies.
they're burning. Dead body
Exactly.
power. That
Yeah,
is
exactly.
so morbid.
You never know what
So,
they
so
got up
morbid.
to in the
Oh,
1800s.
God.
It's unknown.
Don't like that.
But
Mm-mm. Do not like that.
yeah, so that same article also confirmed what I was just thinking, that a lot of people died in there. It says historical accounts show that a majority of the patients that were brought to the hospital at that time died. So,
Sick.
either way, that building has seen a lot of death, whether it was
Yeah.
from tuberculosis or something else. Um, I'm sure there are presences there, and I experienced them firsthand. So,
Let's hear it.
yes. Well, okay, sorry. Here's another word of mouth thing that I had heard,
Yeah.
that the
I
floor,
want all the context.
okay, the floor where so I had to process samples from patients at the end of my shifts when I was still working my first job there. And I worked from 2 to 10 p.m., sometimes 11. So it was getting pretty late into the night. And I would have to do those at the very end of my shift. So I'd be going into this lab definitely after dark and definitely after other people had left their offices.
Yeah.
So just already that's creepy to be in an
Yeah.
empty
What?
building, especially when people quickly tell you what they think the history of that building is
Right.
when you start. So,
As they're walking out, you're the last one there. They're like, hey,
hey,
tons of people died here. You're like,
exactly.
cool, see you tomorrow, Greg.
Just so you know, thanks so much.
Have a good
Yeah.
night.
Yeah, it's just a weird vibe in there, and
Mm-hmm.
I had I had this experience happen to me. I was in the lab and I had to wear a lab coat because I was handling respiratory specimens.
Because you're a doctor.
Because I'm basically a doctor and a scientist. So that's me. Um, and I was just feeling odd, maybe more odd than normal, that
Yeah.
normal in that building. And I was standing with my back to the door and just
Never a good
doing my
start.
thing. And
Never a good start.
yeah, no, I felt just a distinct tug, like two tugs on the back of my lab coat. And I was thinking, okay, did I get caught on something? But I wasn't moving.
Right.
And I didn't know if, like, I wasn't wearing a belt or anything for it to get caught
Yeah.
on. It was just a clear 2 tugs kind of toward the bottom of the lab coat. And I just couldn't bring myself to turn around because
oh my God.
I knew that someone had told me that that was once the children's ward in the hospital.
No.
So I just felt like I'm going to turn around and see a ghost child, and I can't do that right now.
So, really, do not have the capacity for that today.
No, I already hate this job. Let's not add a ghost child.
You're like, in this economy, ghost child, no.
No, thank you. So that's literally what I said. I said out loud, no, thank you, and finished what I was doing. And that was all I could think to do because I didn't want to look, and that's all I could muster the courage to do was say, no, thanks.
That's the most Amy thing I've ever heard. No, thank you. Just continues with the samples.
I don't know. What do you think you would have done in that scenario?
I would have whipped around. Because that's really interesting because I feel like in those scenarios, the 2 options are fight or flight, right? Mm-hmm. But you did neither. Like I wouldn't have, there's no way I'd have that level of calm that I'd be like, that is frightening. I'm not turning around. Like I would be like, who did that? And then I would punch them in the throat fast, quick. Like I would be zoom out of there.
No tolerance for that.
Zero tolerance. I mean, and I've never had tolerance for that because funny story, not paranormal whatsoever, but I was scared as a child of monsters when specifically at the moment I flushed the toilet. I thought flushing the toilet would unleash the monsters. Like why? Who knows? I probably saw some stupid like snake coming out of a toilet or something on Animal Planet.
I hate those.
So I was in a restaurant and we were in one of the like handicapped stalls and my mom went in with me. I was little. I was like, I don't know, 7 or 8 or something. Mm-hmm. I wasn't. She was in the bathroom in the stall next to me, and she had finished. So she was out. Okay, this is what happened. She was out washing her hands, and I'm finishing, and I didn't realize it was an automatic flush. And so I stood up, pulled up my pants. That thing flushed, and I went shooting underneath the door. I didn't even wait to open the door. I was like, zero, I'm out of here. And my mom was like, what happened? I was like, the toilet just flushed on me and it really scared me. Oh she was like, what did you think was going to happen? I was like, I don't know, monsters or something.
Wow.
She was like, okay, well, you have to crawl back under and unlock it. I was like, great. So that just goes to show you. Yeah, I have no tolerance for spookies. Up in my grill. Like, I'm like, no.
Your flight instinct is fully intact.
Yeah. I feel like I would be like a fight and then flight kind of person. Like I'd do like a quick jab to the face area and then sprint. You though are like Zen yogi master over there.
Apparently.
No, thank you. And you're polite about it? Like what?
I just figure, I don't know, being polite gets you farther than maybe other things.
That's true.
So
that is very, very true.
And it worked out in this scenario because I finished and left and nothing happened from there. But then I did recount this story to someone else that I worked with. And he said, I'm not surprised by that because he used to have his office in that building. And he works nights in the emergency department. So he would be up at all hours. And he said he would like never go in there because he used to hear like laughing and just general sounds of voices that no one else was in there. So he said, I wasn't surprised to hear that maybe it was like a kid or just that anything happened in that building in general. So, yeah.
So to take like a skeptic's perspective for a moment, I feel like these are the kinds of things though that it's really hard to like explain away, because like getting your coat tugged on, and the other thing too is like even like our experiences at Cal Poly, like I feel like in the moment your immediate instinct is to think of a logical explanation for something, and when you walk yourself through how that's not possible, the panic sets in and you're like, oh shit, this is real. But then when you recount it, then other people think of those same logical solutions that you had thought of in the moment. But you're like, no, you don't understand. It couldn't have been that because this and this and this other thing.
Right.
But I feel like stuff like that too. I mean, it's so hard to like, I think so many people don't share these stories. And I know that's kind of a common theme on some of the other paranormal podcasts I listen to, where people write in or whatever, and they always preface their message with something along the lines of, I've been way too nervous to say this before. Like I haven't told anyone this before or I've only told a handful of people because I'm afraid people won't believe me, or I'm going to scare the shit out of them or whatever. But I think that's why, because people are like, no one's going to believe that this is true. So I'm just going to keep it to myself. But when you're in that moment, and you just know, you're like, something's not right. And it's not just something I can physically explain away.
Yeah.
So like a tug on the coat, like hearing kids laughing. I mean, I guess like, yay that they're happy on the other side. That's cute.
That's good.
But also, yikes, stay away from me.
Yeah, I know. But I don't know how, because I don't feel like I choose to be open to having these things happen to me. It just does. So I don't understand, I guess, people who never have anything like this happen and don't believe it at all. Like, what's the difference? Is there just some biological thing going on? Or can spirits tell that you'll believe that it happened? I don't know. But
well, I mean, I was thinking about it too. Just our experience, all of our weird experiences in PCV, but also just like some of the weird stuff that happened that wasn't necessarily like another entity, but just like weird things that happened. So like the time you read my mind and the time. So I feel like I want to hear both of these stories from your perspective too, but I think like I'll start with the mind reading and then you tell the healing touch one, because I'm very curious to hear your perspective on that. So this also happened in Poly Canyon Village, which I was trying to think after we recorded last episode, like, have we had an experience like that since PCV? I don't know that we have.
No, not like that.
Which again makes me think, like, is this land? Is there something more to it that, kind of, I don't know,
inner veil,
we channeled it or whatever unintentionally. So the mind reading incident was, so it was myself, Amy, Lauren, and our other friend Jeff were all sitting around in like the main little living area of our place. And Kayla, who was our other roommate, was not there. And we're all just kind of sitting around, like shooting the shit, whatever. And I thought in my mind, I wonder where Kayla is. I realized that she wasn't there and thought, where's Kayla? And it was to the point where I almost had the words were in my mouth. Like it was so forward on my mind and in my body even that it was like about to come out. And I don't know why, but I stopped myself because maybe I realized where she was, or I don't know why. But so I'm just sitting there and I hadn't really been talking. So it's like, we're all kind of talking across the room, sort of in a, general circle. And Amy just turns to me and goes, she's with Cody, who's her now husband. Just a side note. She's with Cody. And I think Jeff like snapped his head and was like, what? And I was like looking at Amy like, what? And Jeff was like, did you ask a question? And I was like, in my head I did, not aloud. And Amy heard it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
As
heard
if I had
your
spoken it.
voice. Yeah, I heard your voice
That
in my
is,
head saying, "Hey, where's Kayla?" And I thought that you had said it out loud. So I answered. And
yeah,
I can't explain that at all. I don't know. It hasn't happened
it's
since.
wild. That was one of the most like surreal experiences. Like I
Yeah.
was just like, and I would say Amy and I are very connected to one another, like
Yeah.
energetically.
Mm-hmm.
I can't explain why beyond like our friendship being a very strong bond, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was just that was like such a crazy moment. And I think I want to say that was kind of before all the spooky stuff started happening.
Yeah, I can't remember the
I don't
timeline,
remember when it
but
was.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't either.
I want to specify that we hadn't been talking about Kayla before that.
No,
We might have
no, we had
been
not.
silent for a while before that happened. Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't relevant to what was
No, it
happening
was not
before.
at all relevant, which is why Jeff reacted kind of strongly. He was like,
Yeah.
what?
What?
What'd you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, very bizarre. Very, very bizarre.
Yeah.
Okay, you have to tell the healing touch one.
Okay. So I hope I'm thinking of the right one because I'm picturing one also that happened at the Del Norte house, but maybe I'm just mixing them up. But yeah, so I guess some background. My mom's close friend was a healing touch practitioner. And when I was little, she used to do like her, I guess, the practice hours that she was required to get for her certification on me. So I've always been really into that. I loved how it felt. And I did a couple workshops with her about how to do it myself. So, and I felt like I've always been pretty in tune with people, especially the ones that I love, and I can feel energies. So I felt like I liked doing that with people. And Olivia also has been open to that. So we used to do that, especially when her stomach issues were so bad. So I remember doing this where I was like trying to, I guess, clear the field or something, or just doing what my mom's friend, her name is Lori, had talked about. It's called the pain drain. So it's like, filtering the pain up my arm through my body and down my other arm out my hand. So I think that's what I was doing. And I was doing it over your stomach, I think. And I felt it like as if a bubble burst. It was like it popped and just like flew through my body. And it was so bizarre. It was as if I was actually touching something, but my hand was hovering above you. So that was, yeah.
No, that's the exact time I'm thinking of because I think we were doing it on Kayla's bed for some reason. That's the memory to me, although just because I remember the bed was low and she had her bed down kind of low compared to ours, which were up higher. But yeah, so I have my eyes closed and I'd done, for some background on my side, like I'd done some work with a Reiki practitioner, which is, as someone who's like being practiced on, feels pretty similar, although Reiki uses like energy from the planets. It's just different, but the experience as, when it's being done on you is relatively similar. And I had a lot of luck with Reiki after having, kind of running through all of the options with Western medicine and was like, okay, well, we'll give Eastern a go. And yeah, found a lot of success with like guided meditation and Reiki together. So Amy was like, well, I can try healing touch. And so I'm like laying down on my back, have my eyes closed, and I can like, I can't, your hands are probably what, like 6 inches above my skin. Yeah, there's a good amount of distance. So it's not like, she would accidentally touch me firmly. Like it would be very obvious if that were to happen. But so she was kind of doing this like, so kind of like raking motion is what it seemed like. And then, like she said, that like pain drain where it's then like sort of raking some of that pain into her arm and then sort of flicking it out through the other hand. And I could hear, because her rings would like kind of clash together and kind of make a snapping sound. And so I could hear her doing that, but I couldn't feel anything that she was doing until it felt like she took all 4 of her fingers and raked them down my stomach. Like not in a painful way, not hard, but like firmly, as if she were trying to like massage my stomach. And my eyes snapped open and she's staring at me, eyes wide open. And we were both just like, what? I was like, did you touch me? And she was like, no. And I was like, that was so weird. She was like, I know, I felt that too. That was so weird.
Mm-hmm.
So that was just another one of those like very odd instances of who knows what, if that place just, was like a breeding ground for anything energetic or spiritual or, I mean, even demonic. Like, I hate to say that, but honestly,
could be.
So freaking creepy, all of the stuff that happened. But those 2 instances were actually very cool. Yeah, it was very cool.
Yeah, that was the good kind of spooky.
Yes, exactly. The good kind of spooky. Exactly. I did. So just going back quickly before we kind of wrap things up here, I did go back to just double check on the Scott Peterson thing. And it's behind a paywall, but the LA Times just posted on August 10th. So like a little over a month ago of 2021. The headline is "Defense in Kristen Smart Case Points to Scott Peterson." So again, this is coming from the Flores defense. So it's like, okay, that, that doesn't, they're probably grasping at straws, but it's just interesting because, it kind of continues. The name of convicted killer Scott Peterson has emerged in another high profile case, the slaying of Cal Poly San Luis Obispo student Kristen Smart. So there's definitely like, people are aware of how bizarre that connection is, that they were there at the same time. And he was a suspect back in 2017. There were articles that showed he was a suspect at that time as well. Looking in hindsight to 1996 after the Peterson trial came to a close. So very creepy. We don't really have any like conclusive evidence as to what the hell that was. It seems like the Denver health history makes a lot more sense than, but then again, like, I don't want to mess around with like the Great Spirit. Like, I don't know what's up with that. No. And like, white people colonized that land. Like, we probably were not that welcome.
No. Maybe that's why things were happening. I find that
maybe
more powerful actually than thinking of like a hospital where there probably are, ghosts as we traditionally think about them. But Poly Canyon just, it seems like it could be some more magical spiritual place.
Totally. So. Yeah. And I mean, it felt that way. I mean, it was so, the apartments themselves were very like modern and, kind of urban sprawl looking, but the land behind that, like Architecture Graveyard, which isn't an actual graveyard, just side note, it's where the architecture student senior projects go to die, but also to live on. They sort of put these like huge structures that the architecture students create for their senior projects out there. And then you can like go and hike in the area, and there are like wild horses and cows and all sorts of stuff. But I mean, the land is so large, the Cal Poly campus, because there are like sheep units and, there's a beekeeping unit, and it's a big ag school. So, I mean, I always kind of felt like it felt when you went out to Architecture Graveyard and beyond, like you're in the middle of nowhere. Like you're just in the middle of like the desert or something.
Yeah.
It's very kind of a bizarre, like detached from reality kind of feeling. So I could totally see that.
Yeah, definitely. It's still connected to the natural world more than it's been overtaken by the campus.
Yeah, exactly. Well, shit. Well, that's what we've got for this week, guys. We have some other topics. We're going to decide on what exactly we want to talk about, but we would love to hear any suggestions or any of your stories. Please email us at girlsgonespooky@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, also Girls Gone Spooky. And yeah, we will drop another one of these probably next week. And in the meantime, stay spooky.
Stay spooky. Thank you for listening.
Yeah. Bye, guys.